All right, so we're going to go into our next program. Each conference, we often find some instructor that give us our participants some tools to help some practical, purpose. This year, we're lucky enough to have Mr. Brian O'Shea to give us a lecture about how to collect information, evidence materials about human rights abuse as a citizen. Mr. O'Shea has a very impressive resume. He has been working in this field for over 2 decades. And he worked with the military intelligence with the two special forces groups. And later he worked in the private sector. He worked in all over the world in 27 different countries. And he founded his own company called Strike Peers. He served as the CEO. And he's going to give us some practical information skills, how to collect information. We found those type of tools are often very helpful in the past as we investigating the human rights abuse, such as in Xinjiang, the forced labor products, stuff like that. It's always very helpful. Mr. O'Shea has 3 undergraduate degrees, a master's degree in criminology. So he's very experienced. Let me just summarize in Chinese. I was asked to do that. 我们在每次开这个族群青年领袖演习营的时候呢，都会请一些专家来给我们做一些具体的培训，就是一些比较有用的一些工具啊。那这次呢，我们就请到这个Brian O'Hill 这个先生，他呢，这个在这个领域是一个专家，过去是在2个特种部队专门收集情报，做收集情报工作的。那自己后来成立了自己的这个公司，就专门从事罪证的这个调查呀，这个网络安全啊这些问题。所以他可能给我们一些非常好的一些建议，在我们收集人权侵害的证据这方面一些这个工具可以使用方法。所以呢，我们这个非常有幸能够请到他来做这个这个讲座。All right, Brian, can you please go ahead?
Yes, can everyone hear me okay?
Sure.
Great. I apologize for being on my iPhone. I'm actually on a job as we speak. So if you see me glancing that way, it's because I have a series of cameras pointed in that direction. I just have to make sure they're running. Certainly not props, it was just timing. So yes, most of what I want to talk to you about, and in the time that we have, there's a lot to cover. This is not something to share about hacking or really cool, unfortunately, I'm sorry, not really cool ninja type methods for, getting information. You guys, a lot of, especially younger folks, probably know a lot more cooler tricks than I do. But what I've noticed recently is the need for kind of a fundamental base in how to collect intelligence. Everyone can collect it. A lot of people collect, and then they don't know what to do with it, or they don't know how to triage intelligence and know what's important, know what's propaganda. These days, it's pretty easy to spot propaganda, but there's so much of it out there. How do you get to the good stuff? How do you get to the needle turning stuff, as we say? So what I'm going to talk about today is really the process. How do you plan your collection? Whether it's online, whether it's surveillance, whether it is elicitation from interviews, conferences, things like that. And the methods for intelligence, whether it's human rights, whether it's investigating, such as human smuggling or helping a private party assist in keeping a crime from happening to them. It's all the same. One thing about the international family of intelligence professionals, as we call them, whether they're friend or foe, they all pretty much operate under the same fundamentals. So understanding those fundamentals can certainly help you get to the intelligence you need that is both actionable and will certainly make them change course, whether you're in defense mode or help push them away if you're in offense mode. So with that, the first thing I will say is, and feel free to stop me, Doctor, if you have any questions or someone in the audience does. With that, the first thing that I have noticed watching a lot of people, a lot of journalists that I'm very close to, or citizen detectives, as I like to call them, is the first thing you have to do is plan. You have to plan what you're going to collect. Anyone could go to the internet and go to the first 3 pages of Google, let's say, and think they found, you know, the John F. Kennedy assassination plot. But as we know, websites can go up in 10 minutes and look very real. So the first thing I like to do when we plan is I'll ask people, what do you want to know? It's a simple question, but so many people don't ask it when they start collecting information. And information, intelligence, these are all interchangeable as terms. So the first thing I like to do is plan. So if I have a client or I'm helping, you know, a group such as yours or any other group, the first thing I say is, what do you want to know? Like, what are you trying to get at? And an answer isn't everything bad about that other entity. As we know, in the case of the CCP or China, it's a giant, multifaceted target, and with lots of offices. It would take a lifetime or two to go through all of that. So, what do you want to know? For instance, something happened to you. Your office was hacked or bugged, and you want to know who did it. That's a great question to start with. So you want to start with what I call key intelligence topics, or KITs, KITs. That is the question, like the strategic level question. So for instance, a great example of this is who is trying to infiltrate my human rights organization and why? And that's what you start with. Beneath that, you start formulating key intelligence questions now, or KICs. Now the key here is the first one, the key intelligence topic, that comes from the client. The key intelligence questions are what you as a collector need to formulate. How do you have sub-questions to support this higher question? So a key intelligence question for who is trying to infiltrate my human rights organization may be, who would have a motivation? Who are our current real enemies? Or even so, believe it or not, even in human rights, who are my financial competitors? There's a lot of human rights organizations in the United States anyways, who they do get donations. Some people do use nonprofits as a source of revenue. So there are actual competitors. I've been made aware of this through many cases where I was flabbergasted. You know, what do you mean the Girl Scouts are spying on the Boy Scouts? That doesn't happen. That's an example. I don't know if that happens with them, but this does happen. And so I like to, as you can see, I take a very business approach to how I look at things, because whether it's my past experience, whether it is currently the situation now, I really truly believe from experience and from many, many cases that everything goes back to following the money. In the grand scheme of things, most people who are hostile tend to be motivated more by money than ideology. And that's where I like to start. So with that said, formulate your questions. Who's trying to infiltrate it? Why? Who are the top 3 suspects? And then under those, you're gonna have more questions, just like when you're writing a thesis outline, more questions under that. Who are their top 3 executives or leaders? Who have they partnered with recently? Which media source have they appeared in the most recently that was giving them softball questions. That could be a propaganda arm that you were unaware of. So the next thing, once you have your questions, that I like to do is formulate, really think about, okay, which sources, list your sources, where can I go? And we'll stick with the internet for now in the interest of time, and I'll get into some more exciting stuff if time allows. But which sources can I go to? Is media a source? Not these days. Media these days, in my opinion, except for a couple examples, all media is private media. And even if it gets its funding from donations or donations like you, people use donations as tax write-offs. People use donations as leverage points for media. So I don't want to jump on the bandwagon and say, I don't trust media, but as a good source of intelligence, I find the only use for media is to find out if it's very clear if they're working for an entity. And we all know the media that is very clearly. What I like to do is, say, okay, what are they not telling me? And that's how I look at mainstream media, whether it's our top 5 or overseas media. Okay, what are they not telling me? They're telling me that, Donald Trump wants to steal all the animals in the Bronx Zoo. But is that true? Probably not in that case. So, but maybe someone is going to steal something, and this is a deflection point. So what I found in recent times with headlines, except for, again, a few examples, media tends to be a deflection device as well as a propaganda device for a lot of organizations, and not just hostile governments, for businesses, for hedge funds. It's so clearly biased in many, many respects. But it is a great source for figuring out who has the most to gain from the deflection or from this biased headline. And then from there, and we'll circle back to media, we go into what I call silhouetting. So I'll look at 6 or 7 media sources, and I'll look for a really needle turning or really important story. For instance, there was just a huge executive order that came out saying, the president of the United States has declared China as a national threat to our security. That is a giant headline. That's huge, cutting off all business by January 11th, and it got no coverage. Why did it get no coverage? Whether we all know the feelings towards the current president, but at the same time, that type of headline is so big and affects everyone, both in China, both currently not in China, but still call China their home, and as well as the United States. So why did that not get coverage? And did anyone try to cast doubt on an executive order? That's a great way to spot who's working with who, which media source may be biased, who's on the take. And I hate to say this, and I do, with all due respect to those very good, ethical, hardworking journalists out there, because there's a lot of them. You just don't get to hear them as much anymore. And with that, we will go into, so from the media, other sources you should look at. Let's say you're online. What I like to do when I go online is I literally ignore the first 3 to 5 pages of Google. I'll skim them as I search, but I tend to ignore them because Google controls what's in those first pages. And they expect that most people won't go to the 6th, 7th, 20th page of Google. Now, I have to look at them. One thing about intelligence that I do believe certain countries do better than we do is they take the approach of collect everything. Collect it all, go through it later. Collect every little thing, even if it doesn't seem relevant. And let me back up because I missed an important point. On that note, it's very important that the first step, once you're at the collection phase, is just collect it. Don't read it too thoroughly, don't triage it, don't try to be an analyst at that point. Type in your keyword that you want. Let's say it is Texas Mexican border. What you want to do is the first thing, and I will send out a note to you guys so you can pass out a handout after this. The first thing you want to do with that is you go to Google and you want to put quotes around your query. Always put quotes around it. Otherwise, you're going to get too much. So it would be like Texas, the ampersand, Mexico, the ampersand, or and. border wall. And you're only going to get those results that have those words. And this is, I know for a lot of people, this is well-known stuff. But then the very next thing I do, because I like to go right to the primary source, meaning who is the source of that intelligence, not the secondary source as who's talking about that intelligence. So the very next thing I do is after my query, I will put file type : and the type of document. So for instance, file type : PDF, all one word. And now you're only going to get PDFs on that subject. In the United States, all legal cases are published in PDF format. So if you're looking for a legal case, you want to start by making all your searches PDFs. So file type : PDF. And if that brings back too many results, I'll add to that. I will say file type : PDF, and then I'll go to the search tools in the top right-hand corner of your Google after you launch your search. So you put in your thing, you launch your search, then it gives you options, images, web, news, go all the way over. You'll see that search tools. Click on that, drop that down, and it'll give you a time window that you can choose from. Last hour, last 24 hours, last month, last week, last year. Now on your iPhone, they only give you the option of up to past year or any time, 1 month, 6 months. You can only choose one of those. On your desktop, you can actually do a custom range where you can type in, I only want search results between these ranges. And that really, really cuts down the process. The whole point of this is to let you get to the intel fast, especially before it disappears. So once you've boiled that down, if you still want to go deeper, you can go at the end of your thing. So you have Texas-Mexican border, you have file type : PDF, searching within the last 6 months. And then to your search, you want to add at the very end of it, site : star.gov. So all one word. And what that's going to do is that star is a wild card. So it's only now going to pick up those anything that has those 3 keywords. Anything that has those 3 keywords and is a PDF. Anything that has those 3 keywords is a PDF and was published or put on the internet in the last 6 months. And now that you've narrowed down even more, all those other results, but only from government sites. And the star.gov is, or star.com or star.int, star.cn. These are really great tools because you may not know the actual website. So it's going to give you anything that ends with gov or com or anything like that. It's a great way to find emails too. You can do a search, you're trying to find someone's email that you're looking into and you don't know it. So the first thing you might want to do is, let's say the company is, I'll just give you mine, strikerpierce.com. So you want to do a search on, in quotes, quote, star at strikerpierce.com, end quote. And you're going to pull up every email in Stryker Pierce that's been published on the internet for contact information. This gives you the structure of the email. So if my email structure is B. O'Shea, you can guess that most of my employees will be under the, are we still on? Can you still hear me? Can you still hear me? Okay, good, good. You can guess that the email structure will remain the same. So if I have Tim Smith, it'll probably say T. Smith. Those are just little tricks. And these, you can find all of these. I'll send out a handout. These are all available online. These aren't, unfortunately, not really super cool tricks that I learned in a shadowy agency anywhere, but they're so effective. Now, once you do that, you want to just work through, you want to list what you've looked at. So if you've looked at, I like to start with last hour, last day, last month, last year, and you want to check it off as you go. You may even want to pre-template a checklist. That's what we do. Again, and you're pulling in all the data. Then you can switch to file types. A lot of college kids will switch the file type to PPT or PowerPoint if they're late making their presentation for their history class. So just type in, War of 1812 file type PPT last year, and they've got themselves a PowerPoint ready to go. Now, there's other sources of intelligence that you want to look at too. If you get a document, always go to the properties. See if they left the author name in it. And you can see when it was last modified, when it was saved, those type of things. And in a half an hour, I can't really cover what I want to. So I certainly am going to be able to answer questions one-on-one if people want to contact me. And then finally, the thing I want to really, really get into is don't just rely on what's on the internet. It's a big, it's easy to do, especially with lockdowns. I almost think personally that locking us down, I feel like there might be some unwitting or witting intent there to keep us in the dark and to make our one intelligence source the internet. But there's other sources out there. That's why I recently drove across the country from the East Coast to the West Coast, stopping in every state along the way to look at what's going on with my own eyes, to talk to people. Those are all sources as well, and to get a feel for it, which really underlines the point that you want to have multiple sources. If you've noticed the news recently, if they even source anything, they usually will source, a lot of them are sourcing themselves. Like you click on the link and it takes you to another article, and that doesn't help you. You want to get to the source. If you look at, for instance, the COVID numbers, you usually end up at Johns Hopkins University, but you can't go any deeper than that. So it does take some digging. It takes some reading. You want to use multiple sources. If you cannot get what you have from the internet, pick up the phone, hit star 67, make a phone call, and just, ask for information. You don't have to lie. You just don't have to give all the details of why you're calling. The other thing you want to do as well is always carry a camera or your phone or be ready to record something. You may stumble upon a story, and it's a really, really interesting thing to do, is to stumble upon a story and see how the news covers it. This does a lot of things for you. It lets you know what media is trying to censor. It also lets you know in what, the real story is. Now, you are just a single source too. So then you want to do your own research on yourself and find out what is the bigger picture. Regarding China in general, I just thought about this last night, and don't laugh. Where you're always evolving, you're always coming up with new ideas. And I think China, in what they publish, because it's a closed internet, so all these .cns, I look at those as, okay, that's what they want me to see, because it is a closed internet. But what's interesting about that is if you compare the Chinese government to all other governments, especially like the old USSR structure or Russia, it's easy to find out what they're not putting out there, which offices are not represented on their internet. It's also really interesting to look at taboo word lists on the, put out by the Chinese government, which are fairly easy to come by. And okay, which words are they focused on you not saying? But that also goes into understanding the culture of what you're looking at. I know a lot about a lot of cultures. I had to refresh my knowledge of current Chinese culture on the internet, as well as, and thanks to my wonderful friends in this organization, I'm also asking questions. What's going on over there? Why do they do this? Like, for instance, I didn't know about the switching of names with the surname and the first name until recently. And that's a basic thing, but that's why it's really important to get out of the tunnel of the internet and get out into the world as much as you can. Even if you don't have access to the area you're looking at, talk to other people about it who've been there, who do business with it. What's a real opportunity here is it's really easy to spot which countries are doing business aggressively with this particular entity. And their internets are open, and you can find a lot there. It's really interesting to go to a certain website like MOFA and see which countries are reporting COVID numbers the quickest. I put one out the other day, and that gives you a sense of, okay, which way is the Belt and Road heading? That's a great way, in my opinion, and it's worked so far for many things, to do predictive analysis. And then trying to make sure I covered everything. And just, again, go and talk to people, but talk to people at universities, but also talk to people outside of your comfort zone. Don't just talk to, say, a lot of people that I know, they may only be comfortable with talking to other college students, but they may not ever really meet someone from the Midwest who drives a tractor. And that's kind of hard to do, but you don't have to go to the Midwest. Just talk to the guy outside your city who's running the excavator and ask him about his excavator, and then get to know him or her. And that's the key thing too, because every single person is a great source of information. And that doesn't mean you're instrumentalizing people you know and meet, but it's also the beautiful side effect of it is it makes you a great listener, and it really, really opens up communication. One thing, and I'll end with this, and I certainly, in this, if there's time, because there's a lot to cover, and I'm sure I missed a lot. The big point I want to get from this for you is you have to plan your intelligence. So you have to plan, that way you stay on track. You have to collect first, like a vacuum. Just download it and download things. Don't just save links. You have to download these as PDFs. You can print to a PDF on your phone. If you're on an iPhone, you can hit that little arrow on the bottom. It'll pop up. There's a little button that says options, and you could change that to save as PDF. And you can save entire web pages that way and save them right in your phone or your iCloud. I recommend your phone. And then finally, once you've collected as much as you possibly can, then you start analyzing. Then you start sorting. Sort by date, time group. Sort by subject. So you want to first sort by subject. Then you want to sort by date, time group. Present to past, past to present. But that's the very next thing you want to do is sort it. And then you want to start going through and throwing out what you don't need or what's redundant or what's doesn't seem to have any valuable intelligence or isn't answering your question. By throw out, I mean, put it in a different file, because I save everything, because everything always comes up, everything's a source. And then finally, you have to write your product. This is the toughest thing for people, even me. I love having remote control cars with hidden cameras on them that can do 50 miles an hour to, you know, get close to people and look at them and listen to them. I love having cool drones in the sky, which I've never used for a job, but I really, really want to someday. I love having great cameras. It's fun to be in the field. You know, the lockdown for me, I mean, okay, I'm always outside. I'm always with the camera. I'm always going Rambo and going as close to things as I can get. I made my own ghillie suit during the pandemic just because I'd never made a ghillie suit. It was a lot of fun. Not really a good thing to wear in the middle of the city. Got a lot of looks, but you know, it worked. And so the point is, that's all fun. And even collecting, it's great to find things. It's a rush. You find something like, oh my God, I have it. Well, the tough part is sitting down, putting that all together and writing it. And you have to write it. And that is the critical thing, is your presentation of the intelligence you find. So many people are great at collecting, horrible at communicating. And if that is the case, then find someone to work with who's a good communicator, because you have to be able to explain it. You have to remember that, you know, the people that asked you to look into this, they're not in the field with you. They're not seeing what you're seeing. They don't have the context of hours of research and collection. So you need to explain to them what they're looking at, who they're looking at, why they're looking at it. You don't have to explain how you got it unless they ask. I don't like to reveal where I got things unless I have to, you know, for citation purposes. But by and large, you don't want to reveal it if you don't have to, because it's a source and you want to protect that source so it doesn't go away. And be able to present it and educate your listener as you're presenting it. Otherwise, we call that diamonds in a paper bag. You could have the best intelligence, but if no one understands what it is, it's useless. I think I've covered about what I want to cover. Unfortunately, lots of stuff to show you, so I'll probably have to put out a video. But in the meantime, are there any questions from the audience? Oh, I'm having trouble hearing you. Hello?
Thank you, Brian, for your excellent presentation. Let me just summarize quickly in Chinese for our audience. 这个 Brian 他讲的就是几个很重要的问题。那他说，收集这个情报、收集资料呢，最主要的首先就是要制定这个计划。要是没有计划的话呢，你很难知道你要收集什么样的东西。他就是讲了一个这个一个概念，就是叫做 Key Intelligent Topics， KIT， 那就是说就说 比如说他举了一个例子，就是说谁在渗透你的这个组织，这些他为什么要渗透你的组织？然后呢，把这个主要的议题，把它收集情报的这个收集资料情报的这个主要的议题，把它提出来之后呢，那么你再逐渐往下走，那这个他们为什么要这样渗透？他的动机是什么？你的主要的敌手是什么？你的竞争者是哪些？然后呢，就是说再把它一步一步的往下来延伸，找到那个最有用的这个资料和情报。那么它第二点呢，就是说你这个怎么找到这些情报的来源？他说呢，不要相信媒体，不是说不要相信媒体，他媒体很经常的是，他背后有人，比如说金主啊，各种各样的组织啊，各种各样的这个偏见都可能带有偏见，所以呢，不要它可能会成为一种宣传工具。那他说就是不要这个要从它这中间找到这些蛛丝马迹，还是可以的。就首先呢，要确定，比如说他一个新闻报道，这个新闻报道带偏见的新闻报道，谁会从中间获得最大利益？那从这个地方入手呢，来发现问题。第三个呢，它就是就是说在搜索的时候，在我们搜找，尤其在网上搜找的这个线索的情报线索的时候呢，不要就是停留在这个搜索的第一二页上面，因为谷歌在这个放置顶置啊这些这个信息的时候呢，它是有一些特别的这个安排的，所以呢，它可能很多人不会往下走。他说，就你要尽量的收集，收集的越多越好。首先不要管它这些是什么，先把它准确的收集下来以后，再慢慢的去分类，去筛选。这个第四个呢，他就说不要完全依赖这个网络，应当呢去找一些这个其他的渠道，要多渠道的去收集。这个它的核心呢就是想你要有一个计划，要有一个全盘的计划，然后呢要开始就首先把它收集快速的收集下来，再慢慢的分析筛选，最后呢就说你在拿到这个情报以后，经过分析之后，你还要比较能够解释诠释这一个你是一个情报，他说要透露的这个信息，基本上呢他讲的就这几点。Brian, I have 2 questions for you.
Sure, and sorry, I forgot you had to translate, so next time I will go slower.
First question is from a professional perspective, if a foreign agent wants to stalk or monitor a US citizen, how far can they go legally or illegally? And what tips can you do to counter that?
Well, that is a great question because I am literally doing surveillance right now as we speak, right out that window. So what can you do? So the main rule in the United States is right to privacy. You know, what area does someone have an expectation of privacy? Which area do they not? And really the best thing, it changes by state, and that's very important to say. It does change by state. So for instance, but mainly it's line of sight. So if you go outside to your car and someone takes a picture of you, you're both on a public space, they can ask you not to do that. You don't have to stop doing that. If you have your window open and it's visible from a public piece of property, you don't have an expectation of privacy. Someone can put a zoom lens and look through your window. They can't step on your private property, but if you leave your window open, someone in a car can take pictures of what they see through your window. And that's perfectly legal. There's a lot of case law about this. I'll just pause for a second so you can, if you want to convey that. But the gist there is it's all about where you're at and do you have an expectation of privacy. If you're in a public space, you do not legally. If you leave your windows open and they're clearly visible from a public space, you do not have a legal expectation of privacy. Do you want me to pause right there so you can?
quickly. 他说呢，这个每个州的这个法律也是不一样的。关键的是看你是在哪个州，而且你在什么地方。如果是你在一个公共场合没有隐私的这样场合，或者是你的这个人家可以从远距离的照相，你把你的窗户打开了，人家可以照相的话呢，那这些都不受所谓的隐私的这个保护。像这是取决于你在什么地方，这个外国特工或者他在什么地方，公共场所和私人场所是不一样的。Okay, go ahead.
The other thing to look out for is audio surveillance. So right away, any computer hacking, even if you have the person's computer, that's illegal. You cannot go into someone's email, even if you know the password. I know this because I've had a lot of friends come up to me and they're having a trouble in their marriage, and they'll say, I'm going to hack her email. I know his password. I'm going to go look at his emails. Well, there's been husband and wife lawsuits and criminal charges because a spouse looked at another spouse's email. So that's right away. Any type of hacking is illegal, despite the case law. I mean, there might be some exceptions, but by and large, if you have a password that doesn't belong to you and you're going into, or they have a password that doesn't belong to them and they're going into an account that they don't own, you're kind of in tricky, troubling waters. So that's illegal. But audio surveillance is different. You cannot tap phones. Now, I'm only speaking for the United States. So these are the laws that I can speak for. You cannot tap a phone. It's a lot harder to do now with voice over IP and media over IP. That is illegal, okay? But at the same time, there's other ways, and that's why I like to interact with people. You can get information just by talking to people. One of the biggest vulnerabilities of any business or any organization or any person, and ironically, I'm doing it right now, is they want to talk about what they do. People love having an audience. It's just a natural thing. People want some reward for the hard work they do, and that's a good thing. So the key thing is that they want to talk. So agents are very good for, we don't call them agents. I just call them, Intel professionals, but agents, for the sake of this argument, I think simplifies it. They are trained, the thing they train in the most is social engineering and information elicitation. And the reason why that's so important is because when you hack something, you're getting a snapshot in time. If you hack, let's say, a database that has the last quarter's numbers for the business or that government, yeah, you have those, but you don't have a lot of context. Whereas if you recruit someone, if you make someone your friend, and then they always are talking about their day, well, you have near real-time intelligence for free. And that is the cost-effective way that intelligence is really collected. I believe in 2017, I don't have the numbers in front of me, I think cyber hacking cost worldwide businesses in the upper echelons of the $100 billions. Human hacking or social engineering, unwitting recruitment, whatever you want to call it, making people spies, whether they know they are or not, because that's what a spy is. A spy isn't the person, who works at the agency or at the government. The spy is the person they recruit. And that's a big thing to remember. So what will happen is, and where you can recognize it in everyday life, is on Twitter. People that align with your views out of nowhere. Or one of the most popular techniques is recruiting firms. They will call you. Everyone's going to need a job now. And this is probably the biggest vulnerability with so much unemployment. There's going to be a lot of people calling. So if I wanted to get intelligence, let's say I'm a bad guy or a bad agent, and I want to get intelligence, I'm going to go to LinkedIn. I'm going to find someone that has the qualifications and the access or the recent access to the target I want. I'm going to set up a recruiting firm, and I'm going to make a phone call, set up a call, and let them know I want to explore an opportunity with them. Because what is expected on a recruiting call? You're talking about what you do. And you talk about your most recent experience, even if you think you're hiding the intelligence or you think you're hiding the confidential data, you know, and they'll even tell you, talk around it. I don't want to know anything confidential. Of course they do. Just saying the word confidential is triggering your mind to think confidentially. So when people talk around it, they're just giving you a silhouette, and it takes a little internet research to fill in the blanks as to which project is being worked on. What is the next project that's coming out? What's the next initiative that's coming out? So really, really if someone calls you, they have this great opportunity, check them out. And that's the way you can defend yourself against elicitation is, I was trained long ago in the 90s. Like if someone comes up to you and you think they're trying to recruit you, set up a meeting. Say, I'm busy now, I'd love to talk to you. How about Tuesday? Get contact information, collect back on them, because then you can not only figure out who they are, you're not giving up any information. And it's also a test. If someone doesn't have a business card, but they come up to you on the street or you meet them at a business conference, but they're, oh, I'm out of cards, get away from that person. Even if it's innocently, they actually forgot their card. What you do at that point there is just say, well, then why don't you write down your email? Never give out your information unless there's an even exchange. And a business card's fine as long as they're willing to give you one back. If they don't, 9 times out of 10, they're a spy. And look for the people that say they're financial advisors or industry experts. These people are normally spies, whether they're corporate spies, been hired. There's a whole business of this. You can go to any job site and type in competitive intelligence. It's a legitimate business, but it's easy to hide illegitimate businesses that are doing espionage within those. And it doesn't sound as sexy as finding the plans for the F-16, super fighter. But intelligence is like Legos, one little piece at a time, and they're collecting from multiple sources.
Okay, let me just quickly sum up.
Sorry.
他这个基本上就讲啊，这个所以这种方式是不一样的。比如说电邮的话，要是有人来侵入你的这个电邮的话，都基本上是刑事犯罪。即使你知道你这个密码，对方的密码，或者对方这个哪怕你是夫妻，你这个看人家的这个电邮，那这个都可能会构成刑事犯罪。那个录音呢，这个也是有不一样。每个州可能都是不一样的一个情况。他说就说这个你主要是要从一些个像推特呀、领英啊这些个渠道看看他这些渠道比较容易能够辨别这些个特工他们比如说故意来招募啊问你就是说打电话来问你说是你过去干了一些什么事情这些东西都是来钓鱼，就是让你上钩的这样的一些个做法，这些就是要引起警惕。I have another question here from the audience, but before we go into that question, let me ask you, because we often got into this two issue, because our email accounts always got hacked by the Chinese government-sponsored hacking.
Yeah, ours too.
How do you figure out? Because that's a phishing, email. How do you figure out who they are? How to prevent them, from hacking into your email system? That's number one. Number two, like telephone conversation recording, because I know each state is different. If a foreign agent called you and threatened you, can you record in New York or can you record in some other states? Because each state is very different. How can you handle that?
Okay, so I'll answer the last one first, and then I'll pause so you don't have to do all of that at once like last time. Within the United States, recording laws, what they call party consent laws, or many different names, they vary by state. So New York, I don't have it in front of me. I believe New York is what they call a two-party state, meaning both parties have to consent.
Right.
So you have to say, like when a telemarketer says, do you mind if we're recording this call? And the minute you say yes, there's two-party consent. Both parties agree. But there's about half the states, and give or take, that are one-party consent, where you don't have to tell them. You're consenting to record yourself, but that's it. And that you don't have to tell them you're recording. If it's a foreign entity, and there's a lot of case law that goes back and forth on this, but by and large, when you're talking about calls, especially if those calls are received and you didn't make the call. So let's say someone calls you from China and threatens you. You're under federal law at that point, because it's international.
Right. Right.
And by and large, if you didn't make the call, you can record it and you don't have to tell them. And remember this as well, that you're protected by our law. They are not. And so they are not afforded the same rights unless they are a US person under Executive Order 12333. And so they don't get to enjoy the protection that we do unless they're committing a crime within the United States or within our territory. But what I always say is this: you'll see my hashtag, record everything, investigate everything. There's no like recording police out there that are arresting people for having recorded a call. This only comes up typically if you want to use that as evidence, if you want to use that, if you bring that to an authority. Otherwise, no one knows you recorded it. Now, I'm not telling anyone to be dishonest or subversive or anything, but I believe that as laws are ever changing, the law that you should always adhere to is self-protection. And I'm not recording this, but I think they are. But the thing is, if I don't know who someone is, first of all, I don't even pick it up. I don't even pick it up. Let's see how hungry they are. Let's see how many fake numbers they reveal. But yes, so key takeaway: one party, two party consent. You can look this up anywhere on the internet. Just put in party consent laws, United States. But if it is a foreign interaction, it is usually at the federal law. And basically, if they call you internationally, record it. If in doubt, record it. You could always erase it.
Okay. Let me just summarize in Chinese for our audience. 刚才这个 Brian 讲啊，我刚才问他的这个问题呢，就是说，因为如果是我们受到外国特工的这个威胁，电话威胁，什么时候可以录音？他说呢，这个也是取决于比如说各州的情况是不一样的。在纽约州呢，实际上是要两个双方通话的双方都要同意，你才可以进行录音。但是他说呢，如果这个外国特工是从别的地方打进来，就其他国家打进来，就比如说从中国打进来的，来对你进行威胁，这个是在联邦政府法律的保护之下的，所以呢，你可以录音。他一般的情况，他把所有东西都录下来，虽然是就说他主要是说录下来的话呢，虽然你没有告诉对方。但你只要不拿去当证据，也没有人来管你，也没有这个专门来做是不是录音的这个警察来执法，所以呢，他只要你不要拿去做证据的话，也没有什么问题。Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, the other question was email. You can't. I mean, you can do things to make it harder, but by and large, the people that develop the security programs and the VPNs are the same type of people, not the same people always, but the same type of people that can get into those systems. And at the state level, a lot of times that hack is occurring at the server level or at the corporate server level where they store your emails anyways. It's kind of like, why hack someone's bank account when you could hack the bank and have all the bank accounts? So there's really no way to even know at that level. And that's really what things have moved towards. But I will say this 1,000 times to my lovely children and my colleagues that are not in my business. Email should never be your conversation. It makes it too easy. Email for many, like sometimes you have to get something in email if it's your only way of communicating. But if you're, let's say, setting up a phone call, there's no need to say all the details about the phone call in the email. Just you can send the date and time. And then what I recommend for people, let's say you're going to have a meeting, a Zoom meeting like that, set a time. And then when you call to finalize that time, in a case, let's say you're all co-located. So Dr. Yang might be there with 5 people that I'm going to meet with, that, you know, that my group is going to meet with. And my group does other things too, not like mine. But the thing is, set a time and then set a time for a phone call to plan that meeting. You don't have to plan the meeting on email. Say, well, why don't we have a call and then we'll talk about it. It's a lot harder to intercept voice than it is to intercept email. And then the other thing I'll say too is silo your emails. You should have a different, in my opinion, you should have a different email for business, for personal, for nonprofit, for whatever activities you do. I have a separate one for hobbies, and you should have separate credit cards that go with each one of those. I call that siloing. So that way, if they get into one, they can't get into all the others. So many people cross-pollinate their accounts, and it's the equivalent of putting a wall around a house, but not locking the interior doors.
All right, great, thank you. Let me summarize before I ask the final question. 我后来又问他一个问题呢，就说我们因为很多在我们这个人权活动这个社区里头的很多的人，他的电邮被中共的这个黑客侵入，像这样的情况怎么办？怎么样能够预防？他说这个基本上是没有什么太多办法预防的，因为它是国家的这个机构来黑进来，那么而且它基本上是通过这个公司的服饰器的这些东西来进入的，所以比较很难防。那他就说呢，就是他提出的一些办法呢，就是你要使用不同的电邮，多用一些电邮，把它分类，你不同的事项怎么样处理，而且用这个电话用音频，不要太多的依赖这个电邮，音频的这个被拦截的这个可能性比较低一些。Okay, let me ask you the last question. This is from the audience. How we can collect evidence on WeChat's cooperation with the CCP? I don't know if you're familiar with the WeChat. This is a platform.
Very.
Okay. Yes. And we know that WeChat has a close relationship with the CCP. They even have a police station set up in the corporation. And then where can we reach out for technical support? Yes.
What question are you trying to answer? What is your key intelligence topic?
I think they try to. I think our team, the WeChat, we have a WeChat lawsuit team that's trying to collect information about WeChat, how they work closely with the Chinese government, how they censor, people, how they abuse, use.
Sure.
Yeah.
Dr. Han, Dr. Han, I can clarify their question. We want to know how to prove that the WeChat corporation have a relationship with CCP. All of us know that they are working together even, but it's hard for us to find their direct evidence. And how can we find to reach out? What kind of technicians we can reach out to help us to find the evidence?
Well, I'll let you know that I've done a lot of outreach on this question per earlier conversations, and I can say that unfortunately at the very granular level, it's near next to impossible. I can't even, the reaction I received from my very technical people in the San Francisco Bay Area, not my people, my friends, the people that do this type of work, white hat, ethical hackers. There's so many firewalls and moving servers. I don't even know the terminology, but if you're suing, I thought about this a lot. First of all, you just, right now, in my opinion, and I'm certainly not a lawyer, so this is not legal advice, but in my opinion, if this is a civil matter in the United States court, you don't need to prove beyond a reasonable doubt as you do in criminal court. You just need to have a preponderance of evidence in civil matters. And this is a civil matter. And so if it is a US court, the Hong Kong, so the way I see it, and I could be wrong, but the way I see it is think outside the box on this, knowing that you don't have to, and I'm not saying you're not, but knowing that you don't have to have specific data say, boom, smoking gun, they're doing it. That won't exist. And if it does exist, it will continually change. But you just have to prove the relationship in general. And the good news is it's been put out in the state-run media in China recently, I think November 5th, that WeChat is the platform that the new security law in Hong Kong is using, the snitch program. It's in their press that they're using WeChat. There's no, I mean, it's almost like they waited till November to say, okay, yeah, working with WeChat. And it's in black and white. And so that, and again, not a lawyer, that would be for the courts to decide, but that's a great piece of evidence in a civil matter, because that shows that helps build that preponderance of evidence. And here is the Hong Kong government working, using the WeChat platform as their new security hotline thing that they put together over there. And you just want to collect, and this goes back to what I was saying, collect everything you can. You just have to show, yep, pretty much looks like they're working together. That's what you have to do in civil matters. But I'll warn you too, and you know this, I'm sure, be prepared for what they call, I think Robert Spalding, who I'm very, just really have learned so much from his writings, lawfare. And even with a preponderance of evidence, and I have to be careful the way I say this, I would really do some deep research on who is opposition counsel before you go to the case, and have if you find any nefarious connections prior to even any hearing, that's the time to bring them up in a deposition. I realize that, Brian O'Shea seems to be working in a nonprofit, which is funded by these people. And I would ask the court to remove, or ask him to remove himself from this case. Start taking their players off the board in lawfare. So, I don't know if that's General Spalding's term, but I like it. It works. Start making them spend more money. It seems unlimited, but just make them spend more money, make it harder for them. The battle begins normally before the first shot is fired, if a shot is ever fired. When I was in the military, we would call this, intelligence or electronic preparation of the battlefield, where we always knew as much as we could before. We never just charge into a battle. I know you're certainly not doing that, but just collect a ton of stuff, and you just have to make a case that proves preponderance of evidence. Because I will say, I wouldn't even, if someone comes to you and wants to charge you a lot of money, or to find out the server locations and all that, they're not going to be able to do it. And that's from about 11 of the top experts on this. It's there, but unless you have the ability to recruit an insider at Tencent, it's going to be a tough road to climb.
Okay, that's great to know. Let me just quickly sum up what he said. 他说呢，刚才这个有一个问题，就是说怎么样来收集微信和这个中共的合作关系这样的资料。他说呢，这个实际上证明起来是非常难的。他跟湾区硅谷的这些专家也讨论过这个问题，那基本上不太可能。 但是呢，他说呢，这个民事诉讼中啊，其实不需要这样的这个证据，就可以把它搞定。而且呢，像比如说在最近的香港的政府使用这个微信来收集这个安全法呀这些相关的这些资料信息，那这些就是一个非常好的这种证据。然后呢，就是就他这个是意思就是说让大家多收集这方面的这个证据，这些证据就足够来进行起诉。Okay, thank you so much, Brian. I think
would you mind if I just ended on a positive note, because that I'm sure that last comment was a little sobering, and I just, if I could have just 1 minute, I just want to let everyone know something. Having been on the inside of so many different things that you see in movies and that seem insurmountable, I can tell you behind all of this horrible, insurmountable seeing foes that seem like, what can we do? They're so big, you know. There's people behind all of them, and they're not as good as the movies make them seem. Everyone has a weakness, and what I have found in the battles I've fought and the battles that I've fought next to people I love, the people that win are the people that just keep going. And you just keep going, you just keep collecting. So never, ever, ever lose faith in the fact that they're not smarter than you. They're not more powerful than you. And if you keep going and encourage the person next to you to, and everyone keeps encouraging, well, guess what? Now they're scared of you and what you're going to find. Don't believe the hype that you cannot beat insurmountable enemies, because all enemies fall at one point or another. And you definitely, as we say in America, you've got this.
That's great remark. 他这个就是讲啊，这个他说所有的这些技术平台背后都是人在这个操作，所以人呢都会有他的这个弱点。那只要我们坚持下来，不断的收集这些个信息，收集这些情报，最后的你的敌手啊，他都会要坍塌的，就是都会要找到他们的这个什么，就是说让我们坚持做下去，一定能够找到这个一些突破点，他就是这个意思。Thank you so much for your wonderful presentation.
Thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure and an honor. And thank you for everything you guys are doing. You're an inspiration to me, very much so.
Thank you again.
Okay, thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Brian. All right, that's great. It's a wonderful presentation, very practical and helpful. And let's see, now we come to the last session. That is a free discussion.